Welcome, everyone. We're going to give everyone one more minute to get logged in, then we are going to get started because we've got a lot to go over today. Okay, let's get started. Hello and welcome to our webinar, Unleashing the Power of AI and ChatGPT in Economic Development Content Creation. We're very happy to have a great audience today. A special shout out to our presenters whose dedication and efforts have made this webinar possible. Your commitment to gathering valuable insights is really, truly appreciated. For those that may need to step away or want to revisit the content later, don't worry. The webinar is being recorded and will be sent to all of the registered participants. Keep an eye on your inbox for a follow-up email from me that will contain the recording link, as well as any additional resources mentioned during the presentation. We're happy to provide those tools to you to continue your learning beyond this webinar. So as we progress through the presentation, we do encourage you to actively participate. Your questions are crucial to creating a dynamic and engaging discussion. Please utilize the Q&A section to submit your questions, and we'll do our best to address them with any available time that we've got. So thank you again for being a part of this webinar. We hope that you find it enriching and that we're excited to be sharing this experience with you. I'm going to hand it off to our wonderful presenters, Ron and Aaron.
And before you do that, wonderful voice, who are you?
I suppose. I'm Audrey Anderson, the Director of Marketing with Golden Shovel Agency.
Awesome. I want to give a shout out to Audrey and all the team that have helped us do this and put this together. So welcome to Unleashing the Power of AI and ChatGPT in Economic Development Content Creation. I am Ron Krisha. I am the CFO, COO, and one of the original founders of the company as well. And I'm happy to be with my colleague as well, a fellow geek, and just take it from there.
Thanks. I'm Aaron Brissois, CEO of Golden Shovel. Really looking forward to sharing with you guys what we've put together today. This is going to be a very, I'd say, high-level kind of overview of ChatGPT and some of the things that are possible for economic development groups. Today we're going to do a poll up front, and then we're going to dive into what it is, a little bit of the history of AI. We're going to get into some solid examples of how economic developers can use it. And then we're going to talk about some of the things that to be careful of and some best practices. And then in the end, we'll tell you a little bit about how Golden Shovel's been using it. And I think it's going to be a full webinar. So without further ado, let's kick it off.
Yeah, and as we get in there, just a bit of housekeeping. If you have questions, I believe you can throw those in the question and answer or the chat. And if there's time at the end, we'll certainly get to those. So let's go ahead and start with a brief poll. So this is a test. It's a 2-question test. And we just want to gauge your familiarity with AI and ChatGPT at this time. So our behind the scenes technical crew, if you could start the poll, that'd be great. There we go. I think it's up. So all we're asking is, have you used ChatGPT, and how do you plan to use it in the future? And we'll give you just a minute to respond. And just a shout out, I see we're at 69, almost 70. I think we had over 150 registered. So 70 participants so far. So welcome. All right. What do you say? We about ready to start looking at some early results?
Let's check it out.
All right. So starting at the top question, have you used ChatGPT? We have 22% that have not. 15% have used it for a task or a project. 23, I'm comfortable using ChatGPT. So, and then we have 22 that regularly use it. So interesting. We look at our second question. How do you plan to use it in the future? Only 4% so far have said that they're not interested in using it. 9% say I may try to, and 14 say I hope to learn the tool and be comfortable. 68% of you want to explore and incorporate it in your work, and then only 5% of you will let ChatGPT run your life. So,
All
interesting.
right. I think that's a good cross section of ChatGPT experience for our presentation.
Yeah, and certainly not unexpected. So, whoops, there we go. I want to make sure I get to the next slide. There you go. So, Aaron, I'll let you take it from here, and then I'll follow up.
Sure. Well, just starting with the people that I really want to learn more about ChatGPT. What exactly is it? And Ron's going to talk a little bit about the history of how we got here. And but if you recall, it was last year, November, and ChatGPT got launched. It is one of multiple services that are coming out from a whole host of players that are working in the space of AI. What makes it so different than things that had happened before, including things like Siri and Alexa, which had kind of an AI component in them, is that ChatGPT is trained on data from across the entire spectrum of the internet. And it also has a large language model, which allows it to write in the same kind of conversational ways that we engage with each other. And because of that, it's got also quite a large understanding of what people's intentions are when they ask it questions. And it also is a learning tool where it gets better and better and better the more people are engaging with it. And so we'll be giving some examples of how it works and what you can expect to get out of it as we go on. But why don't we start with a little bit of the history, Ron?
Sure. Thanks, Aaron. So a quick brief history. And one of the earliest examples, there's lots of examples, but one of them that I benchmark to is Alan Turing. And if you've seen The Imitation Game, Alan was the one that came up with the machine that helped break the code for the Enigma machine the Nazis had. And then fast forwarding a little bit to Gordon Moore, the co-founder and former CEO of Intel, he made a statement that continues to just show how fast technology is moving, and that is, expect the speed and capability of our computers to increase every 2 years and will pay less. And that this growth is exponential. The interesting piece about that is AI and the tools around AI have been around for a long time, but we're now finding those with the open AI model and other models to our desktops, and the cost has come considerably down. You no longer have to have these high-end tools, and you have an interface directly in. When in 2015, there was actually a pool party that happened, and a number of the folks on this screen were at that party talking about what could happen with AI. That led into the open AI model that became ChatGPT down the road. But just want to put out there that a number of very high-profile people, frankly, billionaires, have been looking at how AI is going to transform our world and what that's going to mean for us down the road. And if you're really interested in looking at some of the philosophical considerations, one of the gentlemen, Demis Hassabis, has just really thought-provoking ideas out there. And here's 3 books that he recommends: The Fabric of Reality, Permutation City, and Consider Phlebas. And it's just talking about what could possibly see in the realm of AI. And I like to look at the big thinkers and what they're thinking down the road, because those could become the tools that we'll see on our desktops. When that group got together at that pool party and in other areas, and these billionaires started talking about what they could do and the technologies they could harness, they were thinking along the lines of forecasting floods, cancer research, prenatal health, pest infection to crops, but these really big ideas. And I think that when we talk about ChatGPT and the AI models, we consider the ethical side that we're going to be talking about later. And where the ethical and morality comes into play is when these AI models get to a prediction point and they start to take the human equation out or just make it a variable, that's going to promote solutions that may, for example, come in conflict with how human beings think. Like, for example, one model might be, how would you improve the atmosphere and clean it up. Well, one of the models may come back and just say, well, take oxygen out, for example. And it starts looking at things looking at problems in ways that human beings may not consider. And that's where I think our dilemmas are going to come in. When we look at today, we're already interacting with AI, and the poll suggests that many of you already know that. When you book a flight, get a loan, agriculture, self-driving cars, drones, AI is already out there, and it's based on these neural networks and probability models that are just trying to put out the best mathematical response to the question put in front of it. When we look at business intelligence and artificial intelligence, that's been around for a long time. And in fact, we at Golden Shovel have been using tools like SEMrush, Lead Forensics, SpyFu, and many other tools to gain access and to tap into lots and lots of data. And then for a long time, we might take that data, that SEO data, and we might put it into a spreadsheet or a Excel or database and start running pivot tables, slicing it, looking at probability models. You might even we've done distributions. Now ChatGPT has the ability to do that and cut down on our analytics. But really what we're allowed to do is take larger amounts of data and compare that for our clients. Aaron?
Yeah, you bet. And I just wanted to comment as we get into ChatGPT. We're going to focus on ChatGPT today because it's the tool that we're using that's accessible. But there are a handful of them out and available that do a variety of different tasks. Now, ChatGPT stole the show in 2023, but you see Google. Ron was talking about the pool party, so to say. Google's heavy. They just unleashed Bard, and they're making expansions onto that, which is available. ChatGPT itself has Microsoft behind it. They did an early $10 billion investment for a large stake in ChatGPT, and you can access ChatGPT actually through their Bing search engines. Facebook has also been working on their own, which is called Llama. And I believe they're now on a second version of that, and even released some of their code open source, which is interesting. ChatGPT also has two different models. There's a free model that you can use, and we'll be going back and forth between a couple of these models today. So depending on whether or not you have a paid subscription or a free one, the free one is available to use. It's actually using ChatGPT 3.5, which is an earlier version of it, for a paid subscription of which is $20 a month currently. They have waves where there's a bunch of subscriptions available, and then they'll shut it down while they work on stuff, and then they'll open up a bunch of them again. That allows for ChatGPT 4, and in 4, one of the benefits of it is they introduced a whole host of types of plugins that can do a variety of things, including searching the web, doing image generation, and et cetera. So we'll be talking about some of the things that are available there. For $20 a month, it's pretty impressively powerful. So let's go on to the next slide here. So just starting for the people that are just learning about ChatGPT, it all begins with a prompt. So to get anything out of ChatGPT, you have to create a prompt. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. How you prompt ChatGPT is the art of getting what you want to get out of it. And the more detailed you make it, the more refined it'll be and more accurate, just like I guess anything else. If you talk to a new trainee and tell them that somebody say an intern's at your work and say, hey, go write an article, you're going to get one thing. But if you tell them to write an article with 3 paragraphs on this topic, you're going to get a different thing. And ChatGPT works like that also. One thing that is important, I think, important to recognize about ChatGPT that's really different than something like Google search is that as you have a conversation with ChatGPT, it follows both the prompts that you've made as well as follows the responses that it's giving you. And it keeps tabs, and not only does it store that in its history, so you can go back to that later, but you don't have to re-ask the entire prompt every single time. And we'll give you some examples of that today, but I might say, hey, ChatGPT, could you write me this great poem? And I want it about whatever, and it'll spit that out. I don't need to say, hey, ChatGPT, will you write me a poem again? I could instead write something like, can you make that longer? And it'll remember that I'd already asked for a poem, and it'll make it longer and say, certainly, and spit something out. So it's that's important, because as we get into this and talk about these prompts, there's things you can save in your history and use it over and over for a variety of different types of services. So let's take a look at the next page. So it's all about the prompts. So what you type in affects what you get. And so we're going to get into a bunch of examples after this, but let me just talk about these particular things. First of all, being very specific and clear, kind of like we spoke. I just talked about, like, how do you want this to be presented, and what are you expecting to get out of it? I want 3 paragraphs back, or I would like to get a list of 10 things. That's stuff that you can put in there and it'll provide you that. But if you don't do that, you're going to get more vague of an answer. And providing context to that. And that could be, I want it to be like a scientific paper, or do you want it to be a light speech that you might give at a party? It can provide that type of context, and it'll adjust it from there. That kind of involves also using that kind of precise language and setting expectations, and just it helps to limit the topics. So if you're going to ask, don't ask ChatGPT for 100 things at once. It'll get confused. And actually, it does this thing we'll talk a little about later, where it has hallucinations and has trouble putting together data sometimes. But if you can focus in on a specific topic that you're trying to accomplish at a time, you'll get better results. If it's a really complex task, like maybe you're trying to make a paper, or you're trying to get some data, or et cetera, doing one piece at a time, you're going to get better results. One of the things that I think is most curious about ChatGPT is you can assign it a lens to look through. You can give it a character personality. So you could say, give me this feedback as if I was if you're a teacher, give me feedback as if I'm a 4th grader. Or you could say, you are an economic developer, in some of the examples that we're going to give today. You could tell it that you are a professor and are going to please give me feedback from that perspective. You can literally give it whatever kind of voice, and it'll take into context that when it's providing responses, which is really cool. When you're typing something when you're doing a prompt in ChatGPT, you want to be careful of making your question too leading. You do want to have enough information if you want it to really address something, or to handle a writing in a certain way. But you don't want to be so leading that you're trying to force it to come out with an answer that you really want it just to type yourself. That's going to be more likely to be biased in its response. And you also don't want to be too vague. And you can learn from your responses. And what that means is, as you do prompting and get your response, you can go back, you can review your prompt. You can also review the response, and then you can make the adjustments on it. So it's like, yes, I like what you wrote, except can you be more specific about this? You can even take your prompts and put them into ChatGPT and ask it to refine the prompt for you, because the ChatGPT has experience with its own prompts. It can say, yeah, that was great, but maybe you can be more specific about this or that. And you can even use it to support that. So that's just a little bit about crafting prompts. And I have a couple examples here on the next slide of just some economic development prompts. Like here's you're an economic developer. From the article provided, create 3 SEO titles. And this would be, let's say you wrote a news article. You could paste it into ChatGPT and ask it to review that and create the 3 SEO titles. You are an economic developer. Analyze the SEO keywords and suggest 3 SEO articles with a title, keywords, and a summary. So now you see that's a little more detailed than the first one. Now you're asking for specifics, titles, keywords, and summary. From whatever it presented, you might write, make me 3 Google ads. And it would take the same content and create it into that, or make a summary blog post that I could use. And I know we're going to get into the examples, but we can see things like, let's say you have an annual report that you're writing, and then you'd be able to post that whole thing in there and have it help with putting an overview together for the board, that type of thing. So, all right, let's get into some examples. I think that's the fun stuff.
Excuse me. One of the beautiful things about ChatGPT is I find it for helping me sort through data. So many times when I'm working with a client or I'm working on a strategy document, I'm looking at the demographics. I'm looking at the U.S. Census Bureau. I'm out in Bureau Labor. I'm always working with data. And a lot of that data I will have to put into some type of document, whether it's an Excel document or something else that's going to help me graph it or put it together. The great aid that ChatGPT does is I can compare data sets very quickly. Now, it's things that we normally would do. I could create pivot tables. I can do that. But it gives me some insights and it leads me down some paths that I can start looking at for trends. So, for example, in this one, I queried the U.S. Census data. I found a couple different sets of data, and then I labeled those and I prompted ChatGPT, compare the two data sets. And what I got for response was certainly things that were not unexpected. It was data that I expected, but it helped me phrase it, build the narration so that I could add my voice and then add style and make sure that then go back and check for accuracy. But very quickly, it could do the analysis for me and give me the response that, frankly, I would have gotten to with some hours of looking at, but it helped condense that time so that I could spend more time looking at other data and looking at other problems. The other nice piece about this is it will come up with things that I may not see. So there are times when it'll build out a correlation or it'll find a causation that I hadn't examined, and it allows me to expand out to see areas of comparison that I should be looking at.
Yeah, and so this, I think that's really exciting, first of all, because the data is a lot easier to process using tools like ChatGPT. There's another whole thing that GPT can do around graphics. And there was a question that came in that I think this would be appropriate time just to hit on it. It was from the Carlton Crothers, said, how will Gemini's multimodal capability impact OpenAI's ChatGPT? What it's going to do is greatly increase the responses that you can get. It's going to be a lot smarter, and it's going to be able to take in all of the different types of formats because it can look at stuff visually. One of the things that I think we're going to have to look forward to, because you got to kind of figure that right now, this technology is very early in its phase. And so you think about how far the cell phone has come, and iPhone has gone from iPhone 1 to iPhone 14, and how it's changed and become smaller and thinner and faster and more advanced in so many ways. We're going to see the exact same thing happen here, only it's going to go even quicker with the support of AI behind it. So that's one of the areas I think particularly with that capability. But there's a few different types of AI tools that do graphics. ChatGPT, or OpenAI specifically, created one called DALL-E, and that's been out and available now for just over 2 years. And there's a couple others. There's Midjourney would be an example of another one. And what they do is they can create based on all the data that it's been trained on images. So let me just show you an example of a economic development one that I put together as a sample here. And you'd be able to use these. You can use ChatGPT images in your to add color to whatever you might be doing, whether it's a marketing message, SEO. You can put it into your reports. And a lot of the graphics that are in this presentation today, just for sake of example, were generated from ChatGPT. So with this one, the prompts really matter, because you can get very different styles and different looks depending on what you type in. It can be as detailed as you want to have a very specific aperture on a camera for a photo, and you want it to have a very detailed, very specific maybe lens type, or you want it to be in a style of a moody Hollywood action flick. Or maybe you want it to be in a watercolor. And depending on what you write and how you prompt it, it makes very different examples. So here's one. I put in a prompt: create a dramatic photo of a businesswoman surveying a construction site. She has on a professional white blazer and a construction helmet. So that might be something that you could use in a economic development related marketing piece. And that's what it gave. You can see it's really very, very stylized, very dramatic. It looks like the light at the end of the tunnel shining down behind a construction site, and she looks sharp and um, nice image. But take a look at the next page, Ron. And if you recall, it's following the threads of this. So now I didn't have to, let's see, did I do a, you can start to say, make it, I want to be a little bit different. I need a different version of it. Can you give me something like it, but make it more photorealistic? And it'll spit out a slightly different one. Now, this one's more photorealistic in the back, but take a look at the next one. Make this image, and I'm still following a track here, make this image in watercolor, and the woman is wearing a VR headset. For you, those of you guys know, Golden Shovel does a fair amount of work in the virtual reality arena, and so, wow, that's a pretty cool, stylish graphic. Now, I remember that I'd already asked for the white blazer, and now she's got a VR headset on, and you see the watercolor look in the background. But then go over on the next one. We'll make it again, but this time in the style of an animated feature film. And in the background, the greenfield site. And she's envisioning an advanced manufacturing plant being built there. And it incorporated the following. So you can kind of see now it has that kind of almost animated look to it. And this is, you can use even things like, I want it to look like a certain type of film, like a Pixar film, or I want it to make it look like any kind of detail in the style of anybody, and it'll come up with something different. So, all right, so that's how we can make graphics with it. And you can, DALL-E actually has its own. You can go use DALL-E by itself, but now that with ChatGPT 4, like I mentioned, it had all of these plugins, and it's advanced to a point now where all of those plugins are just in it, and it knows which plugin to use when it's appropriate. So if you ask it to create an image, it will on the spot there just go and create it. There's a question also on images, which I think is appropriate right now, which is, if I used a generated image on my website, who do I attribute the credit to, if anyone? And that's a really, really good question. As you can imagine, and we'll talk a little more about various ethical considerations, that there's a fair number of artists and actors and illustrators that are, and writers and all of that are concerned about ChatGPT, because these are original images, so to say, in its final form. But once again, all of this has been trained on data that was previously existed. ChatGPT isn't an artist. It doesn't go and think through how it's going to like create this beautiful image. It doesn't really care. It's taking in all of the data of so many different images that were out there before. And then it is making something new. So is that copywritten or not? One of the things, and this actually went to the US government, and it's been decided you cannot copyright images that come out of ChatGPT. But when you credit it, you just credit it to the AI tool that you used. But they're not like, you can't take one and suddenly make it into a specialized copyright, so to say. It's just whatever ChatGPT makes is just an open AI image, but you can use them in your materials.
Yeah, and I just to add a interesting tangent to that. So I am not a visually aesthetic person. I struggle with I'm colorblind, so I struggle with images. But that being said, one of the interesting things about the image side, I was playing with ChatGPT one night, and I was trying to do pictures of myself. So I would type in my name, put Ron Creasure doing this, and ChatGPT actually came back and said, you're a living person, and therefore it won't create images of living people. So I started playing around with, you could create images like I was doing the Wright brothers. I put them on the Apollo 13 mission. You can do fun things like that. But what really became interesting, and my kids actually thought I had gone off the deep end, I realized that aliens and Tyrannosaurus Rex really don't have copyright. Neither one of them are going to sue anybody. So I started creating lots of images and just being creative with like putting images in the set of the Castaway, or trying to find movie scenes. And then ChatGPT would come back and say, well, I can't do that in an actual movie, which led me to get more and more creative. But back to Aaron's point, the prompt had to be super, super creative. But at the same time, there are some limitations on what kind of copyright and what kind of live data you're going to be able to pull into some of these.
Yeah, and one other thing on, just since we're on the image topic, if you're a graphic designer, how do you use these types of pieces? And because it tracks it, you can do things like, for example, this is really great for ideation. If you're just trying to come up with ideas and creative support, you can make storyboards, for example, of what you might want to do if you were making a film, and you can maintain the style throughout that. Or if you're a more advanced graphic designer, there's a couple of tools you're definitely going to be interested in, and perhaps you've seen already. Both in like DALL-E, for example, if you're in there, you can remove a part of a picture and then ask it to generate something new inside that space. And if you are a Photoshop user, there's right now, if you're on the online subscription, you can get the beta, and they've been doing a lot really interesting stuff around generative AI. So, for example, I'll give a live kind of a golden shovel example. So on a website, we have pretty long banners that go up there. They're wide, and we will get photos from a community, but those photos aren't always going to be big and wide. Sometimes they're tall or vertical, or they're square, and they're not going to be a great fit for that. Well, we're able to create the size banner that we need. We can bring in the photo, get it to where we need it to go, and then say, fill in the rest. And it can generate and look at what's on the photo and make sure that the rest of it is mirrored. Not mirrored, I shouldn't say, that's not appropriate, but it generates stuff that looks great and lines up with it and makes it look like it's part of the full photo. That makes it some really interesting stuff. Now, also with the image side of things, there's new AI tools that make it available to upsize an image. So if you've got an image that's too small to be used in graphic design, so to say, you can upload it and say, make it whatever size you want. And in the past, it would just get blown up and blurry, and you'd have these big chunky pixels. But now the AI can figure out what the intent is and actually make a higher resolution image, which then gives you more detail to be able to work with. So really exciting stuff happening in the generative AI space.
So obviously this is an expansive topic. I'm getting the keep moving finger from Audrey, and so I'm going to try
finger
to move.
Is that, Ron?
Keep going. And
okay.
We're past the halfway, so I'm going to go a little bit quicker through my examples and not leave anything out, but just pick up the pace. So grant writing preparation. One of the things that economic developers do is loan applications, maybe grant writing, or just filling out forms. And so here's an example where I could take the hospital nurse loan forgiveness. I could download that PDF. I could drop it into ChatGPT, and I could ask ChatGPT, hey, what do I need to do to complete this? So my prompt was, read this application, frequently asked questions, and give me a list of documents and a to-do list to complete. So this helped me on the front end. Now, it can't complete it. It doesn't know where my data is, but it could quickly come back and say, here are the documents you need to assemble. Here's the to-do list. But it helped me organize and got me prepared if I were to do that application. And I've done this with a number of things, SBA documents and so forth. But it's a great way to go through a long FAQ and just compile it down into a one-page, hey, give me the things I need to do to get started and save me some time.
I think that's awesome. Just another, and there's as many ways of using ChatGPT as you can come up with creative ideas, but researching the value propositions. Now, a lot of people know the value propositions of their own communities, I'd hope, as an economic development professionals. But let's just get an example of this first of all. Because you can also research value propositions of other communities. So you get to both ask for pros and cons, and you can compare. So let's say here's one I used. I live in Stillwater, Minnesota now, which is about 25,000 people, but I lived previously in Santa Cruz, California, which has about 75,000 people, and it's very different than Minnesota, let's put it that way. So here's my prompt. You are a small business owner. Hey, go back to my prompt. I was just, okay, you are a small business owner what are the top 5 pros and cons for doing business in Santa Cruz, California? And okay, now you can go. And so it hits all of them. So as well, there's tourist attraction. It gives just a description, supportive community that's got a good local business support. They have a unique market niche, particularly mentions their environmental focus. They have a lot of environmental related businesses and lots of artists there. They have access to a diverse workforce because of the colleges and that are in the region, and natural beauty, quality of life. So it kind of gave me some propositions for that. Now, these were the positive ones. Let's go to the next slide. Here's the things that were the cons. There was a high cost of living and operation there. There's challenges, regulatory challenges, both from the state as well as in the county. A limited market size. That's a type of community that's only has so much space, so to say, to grow in. There's seasonal fluctuations. And mainly it's relating to tourism, because all the tourists are there at certain times, and that can affect businesses. And then less people when they're off. And then competition, because of there's so many people there, there's some higher level of competition. So there you go, just generated a list of pros and cons of just a single community. And keep in mind with ChatGPT, this was presented to me within about 15 seconds. But let's say I want to compare it. So let's go on to the next example, which is comparing competitive advantages. So now I live in Stillwater. So I asked ChatGPT, what are 5 reasons it would be better to start your business in Stillwater, Minnesota than in Santa Cruz, California? Now they're very different communities, but this is about the ability to create narratives. So as an economic developer, sites are always being compared between different communities. So much of not only you're highlighting all the things that are great, but when you're making a pitch to somebody and you know that they may be considering some other communities, or it might be you against another one, or even in the sense that in the competition for workforce or talent, maybe you're a medium-sized community or rural community that's pulling talent out of a metro area. You can use ChatGPT to help generate some of these narratives on how you might want to make your pitch. And just once again, this is getting some great ideas. So let's find out 5 reasons why it'd be better to be a small business and start it in Stillwater than California. And so it presented to me, number 1, cost of living and operation expenses, the lower cost of living in Stillwater and higher level in Santa Cruz. Let's go to the next one. Business climate, regulatory environment. It took the state into account, and it has a little more business-friendly climate, perhaps, than compared to California, where it's a little tighter. The market saturation and competition, there's less saturated market and smaller in Stillwater. There's community and demographic factors. So the community in Stillwater, known for its strong support of local businesses, and Santa Cruz had recognized it as the pro when we looked at it before. Says, well, there's a shop local culture in Santa Cruz. The tourism can make it ebb and flow. It's not necessarily as consistent. And this seasonal stability, which was related to that. So just as an example, now economic developers, we know what our community strengths are. So maybe this isn't all just like, well, that was obvious. But really what's interesting is that there's so many different cities and there's so many different ways that we can go through and be able to do that. Now, we could go on with example after example after example. So let's just, if you want to pop onto the next slide, I also want to just list some other things you might want to consider doing as an economic developer. That'd be interesting. Here, like policy development and analysis, and be able to understand economic policies. There's business development support. So I think that's pretty cool. Could use it to support local businesses. Workforce development and skills analysis. You can analyze trends that are going on in there. One of the be able to because it can, since it has all of the data from all the universities already inside of ChatGPT and what's going on in the region, it can give you some interesting support and ideas, perhaps. Community engagement and public communication. So if you have to draft a letter that is going to want it to influence the community to consider, say, a new business park or some new infrastructure, you can use it to make a compelling article or a compelling letter or a speech and get support on what the talking points might be. If you are working with the sustainability, green economy initiative space, I think that's a really cool opportunity to be able to think, how can I incorporate more of this into my current plan, for example? And then any kind of scenario planning, like, hey, if this happens, what might happen here, or coming up with some of the strategies. So there's so much more. This is just scratching the surface. Once again, it's up to how much can you think up to see what it's going to be capable of.
Yeah, and I apologize. I have a mouse that keeps clicking. But one of the things I was going to say is, as you use ChatGPT to do your analysis, what we recommend is thinking on the other side. This is why content becomes so important, and why when we work with our clients, we're really making sure we tell their stories, because one of the things that we found is if you have no story, or if you have no information, or you're not controlling your information, whether it's a search engine, a ChatGPT, they're going to come out and they're going to look at that, and then they're going to base that information into their data structure. So it's really, really important that you're putting your content out, you're thinking ahead of how you want to be presented and how you want the AI models to examine your content. Okay, so let's talk about some inaccuracies. So as you're using this on the user side, there certainly are things you should look at. It is imperfect and it is biased. The neural networks that analyze the data, they can only analyze what's in front of them. So if there's too small or there's inaccurate information, you're going to have irregularities or inaccuracies. And so you have to look for that unreliable response. Bias is inherent, whether it's the programmer or the data. There are going to be biases that come up, and we can't remove our perspectives once we put things in. So remember to watch for those and how it's interpreted.
Oh yeah, here's a couple more. One of them is the hallucinations. And what hallucinations are is when it's going to give you wrong information. An example of this would be asking, when did Leonardo da Vinci paint the Mona Lisa, having it come back saying it's in the 1800s, versus the 1500s. And these hallucinations come from the data that it's trained on. I mean, you got to think that it's taking in, it's an insane amount of data points, like in the billions, if not trillions of data points. And they come from all sorts of different types of areas. And so you still have to be really careful with AI, because it'll make something up every once in a while and just be like, this is how it is. And you don't necessarily know exactly where it got that from. And so it's still really important to check that. And the other one is the uncanny valley. This is particularly related to images, but what uncanny valley means, the coin was termed, it's when you're interacting with a robot that's trying to be a human and something's wrong. Like it just feels a little weird. Like as realistic as they might make it look, it just doesn't have that full human quality. That's what the uncanny valley is. And it's particularly happens quite a bit in when you're generating images. Like, wow, that person looks pretty good, but like, God, there's something wrong. Oh, they have 6 fingers, or there'll be an extra hand, or like you'll see something in the photo that just really shouldn't be there. And depending on whatever was trained on it, decided that was something that should fit. So I think it's kind of one of the things to also just keep tabs on.
Yeah, and then as we start to look at some of the best practicals and ethical considerations, be thoughtful and deliberate. Obviously, you're going to get in trouble if you throw a prompt in ChatGPT, you copy it and paste it, and then do it to get caught up on some work. So don't let sloppiness get in your way and lack of planning.
Yep, and then turn down the same path. Just make sure you proofread and edit what you're getting out of ChatGPT. I do not recommend copying and pasting ChatGPT right into something that's going to be used. It's just we talked about some of the risks. Sometimes it's not even accurate, and so we saw some of that happen when people were one of the attorneys this last year used ChatGPT to make a case, and it was hallucinating, and it was talking about various cases from the past that never existed. As so, you just got to make sure you be careful, and plus, you want to give it your own voice anyway.
Yeah, and to that, add your voice and style. Like I said, we may use ChatGPT or we may use other analytics to look at data, but we're always then bringing it into the client voice, and we hire professional writers that are bringing that content to where it should be. So as Aaron expressed earlier, use it for ideation and creation, but don't use it as your final product, because it's not going to be valuable.
Yeah, and just the human voice part of it is really important. I mean, we have a team of writers that write success stories for communities all across the country about businesses that are thriving and talent that's thriving, and it requires to really be a authentic article. It requires the interview with somebody and to get that quote, or to really understand and know that community. This works really well for generating ideas and maybe some stuff you might want to write about, but still having a human voice really matters, in our opinion.
Yeah, and I think the key is, if it's going to be successful, it has an emotional response, and ChatGPT doesn't have the ability to elicit emotions. Check and double check the data. Again, I've seen where people have presented things to me and I'm like, oh, that came from ChatGPT, because those businesses no longer exist, or they didn't exist, or they're in the wrong community. So check and double check for inaccuracies.
We talked a little bit about prompts and just making sure that that's gonna, if you don't like what you're getting, it could be the prompt. It's not necessarily ChatGPT. You can ask for more detail. You can ask for it, once again, to have a persona and have a role. You are this, write it to me from this perspective. Or if something's too complex, write it to me in a basic way so it's simple to understand. And that also can be really useful if you're having to share something that's complex. Sometimes there's things in economic development, particularly around data and analysis, that are hard for other people, the general public, to understand. And you can ask ChatGPT to help simplify what you're trying to say.
Yeah, avoid obviously plagiarism and copyright. It's the simplicity, and you may save some time, is great, but use it as a tool. Don't use it as a final product. You're going to end up with trouble, and it's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and you can ask ChatGPT to reveal its sources. So that's another way to help. I mean, if it's looking throughout the internet trying to find information to put together for you, you can ask it to do that, and it'll share where it's finding some of its information. Staying current on developments. This is just really just staying on top of the news, staying on top of the AI. One of the recent developments on ChatGPT, which was really interesting and exciting, just happened about a month ago, where now it can both look at things and it can talk to you. So your ChatGPT app on your phone can, you could take a picture of something in Spanish and say, translate this to English, or you could take a photo and say, describe what I just took a picture of. Maybe it's a tree or a plant or that type of thing. You can also talk to it. And since it remembers the conversation, it's got 6 different voices, and you can literally have these entire conversations with it. And if you get a chance to do it, it's very interesting.
Use your moral compass. If it feels, and I use this word because it's the best, if it feels icky or like you're getting away with something, rethink about the content. So just use your moral compass when you're using the chat AI content. And again, use it as a tool. It's there for that, but don't cross those lines.
Yeah, and I'll end with experiment and be creative. ChatGPT, we don't know the bounds of it yet. There's people that are find it to be scary because, oh my gosh, it's gonna, what if it replaces my job, or what if it does something like Ron mentioned at the beginning, where it makes recommendations that are going to be bad for humanity and take things over. we don't look at it like that. This is an exciting time. This is a way to generate more ideas faster, to be really creative in whether it's in saving so much time. And so this is the time to experiment. This is the time to see what it's capable of, and to figure out where it can make our lives better.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we just have to recognize is it's out there. People are using it. It's already out of the box. And it's how do you harness that power? How do you use it to your advantage? Because we already know that the algorithms are out there. It's just, whether it's Google or anybody else, they're using algorithms to do things, even site selection. So we have to be on the cutting edge as well. And we have to use those to our advantages, and to help you as economic developers in your communities to also put you on the cutting edge.
Yeah, and then so I said I just touched a little bit on how Golden Shovel's been using this beyond just some of the ways that we've been explaining. We use it sometimes for research and for some of the being able to get images and stuff of that sort. I shared a little bit about that, but we also have been working in. If you're familiar with Golden Shovel, we have an economic gateway system which runs all of the software behind all of our websites that we've built. And so we've built in a ChatGPT function, and this actually launched yesterday. And we decided, although we have lots of ideas for where we want to go with it, this was our first project. And one of the things that was tricky for us to do was to put really good SEO terms, whether it's descriptions and keywords and titles, into our websites, because every single directory listing, for example, is another page on the site. And to have someone go through and create all of that for every single one of those could be, hundreds, if not thousands of pages. And so we use ChatGPT. We built a tool that sits behind in the Economic Gateway admin. So we can go to each of the pages of one of our websites. And we made this, if you see over on the right there, it says AI Assist Pro. And when you first get here, that screen will be, the description will be blank. We can click AI Assist Pro. It uses ChatGPT 3.5. It goes to the web page. It looks at the main content of the page. It takes into account any keywords that we might ask it to use as a priority. It also takes into account the description or descriptor that we want to use for a geographical region, especially if there's multiple cities in a region. We might say we want this to be called the Northeast region. And then it will automatically generate that copy, of which right on the spot here, we can proof it, we can tweak it, and we can hit accept, and it'll update that. So it allows us to do SEO for all of the different pages on the website in a much expedited fashion, where we didn't even have the manpower to do that. We were able to do the homepage and the major sections, but this is really exciting. So this is just the first of what I imagine will be many additions of AI into our software. And since Ron's muted, I'll say we have a white paper coming out. So we wrote a white paper about this topic, and it's going to be coming out on our website sometime likely next week. But we will send a link to all of you on this webinar today. So with a link on how to get that, along with a link to the recording of this.
And one of our commitments is we'll always stay on the cutting edge, and contact us for more strategy ideas. We're here to share those ideas. I know we're coming hard up on the end of this. So from me, again, Ron Krisha, thank you. And certainly send us any questions. And Aaron, you can close us out.
Thank you. Are there any final questions from anybody? Looks like I think we got it covered for now. So if there's any questions, feel free to go to ChatGPT and type them in and see what you get back. So, hey, thank you, all of you, for joining us today and taking time out of your day. And we look forward to more of this on this topic down the road, and we'll get more advanced. Also, this was, once again, a broad overview. There's so much to be able to cover and show. So we'll look forward to having you again in the future for a future presentation. So thank you.